Welcome to Devoted. Today I'm going to talk about Jesus' compassion for people. The fact that Jesus understands us, he understands humankind, and his love towards us and God's love towards us is love and compassion. Jesus came to earth to show God the Father's love to the world. And his compassion, his ministry was driven by love and care and concern for people. In fact, Jesus literally modeled the Father. In John's Gospel, chapter 14, verse 8, one of the disciples, Philip, came to him and said, "Lord, show us the Father and we will be satisfied." Jesus replied, "Have I been with you all this time, Philip, and yet you don't know who I am? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. So why are you asking me to show him to you? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I speak to you are not my own, but my Father who lives in me, who does his work through me." So Jesus came to show the Father to mankind. His words, his actions, his priorities, they were identical to his Father's. And Jesus spoke to a group of people called the Pharisees, religious leaders, who were at that time supposed to represent God to everyone. And he said to these people in Luke chapter 7, verse 33, "For John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say he has a demon, and the Son of Man, on the other hand, feasts and drinks, and you say he's a glutton and a drunkard, and a friend of tax collectors and other sinners." Well, if Jesus is a friend of sinners, well then God the Father is also the friend of sinners. And because he is a friend of sinners, Jesus connected with everyone. He cared for people. He connected with all kinds of people. And the Pharisees, on the other hand, did just the opposite. They disconnected themselves from people. They withdrew from people and even withdrew from most people because they thought that just about all people were sinners. So the Pharisees and experts in the law had their opinion of Jesus, and it was based largely on whom Jesus hung out with, because Jesus liked to hang out with just about everyone, and even people that were really bad people in the eyes of the Pharisees. And the Pharisees had opinion and a rating system, a system for people too as well. Judah Smith, in his book entitled Jesus Is, said, especially bad people, they had a rating system, this bad scale. And on this scale, they had small sins, medium-sized sins, larger sins, supersized sins. And they rated people according to the size of their sin. And so that's what the Pharisees did. They thought all people were sinners, and so they withdrew from them, and they judged most people, which is totally the opposite with Jesus. Jesus did not have a rating system for sin. To him, all sin is equally evil, and all sinners are equally lovable. And Jesus talked about this group of people called the Pharisees. And he said in Matthew's Gospel 23, verse 4, "They crush people with unbearable religious demands and never lift a finger to ease the burden." And that's what he said about them. But you know, truthfully, I look at my own life and I look at my own attitudes towards other people. And you know, I think I've got a little bit of Pharisee in me as well. And maybe you do too. Because truthfully, at times, we tend, as people, as Christians, believers, we can draw back from people because we're just too busy to care, or we're just too busy to help people, and it's sometimes too inconvenient. And it's so easy to point fingers at people and judge people for their badness. Christian author Mark Lee, in his article called "Jesus, Friend of Sinners," said this. He said, "There's so much pain in the world today. God has given the church a job to do, and that job is to love people unconditionally into the kingdom. We have a calling as his body, and that calling is to love so intensely, to forgive so completely, to surround people with mercy and grace so abundantly that they will see us as a refuge from the world's pain. And in seeking refuge in our loving actions and words, they will find God behind it all." And so isn't that true? So behind this is one question. There's one question that remains. When will our words and our actions match up with Jesus? The overarching teaching of Jesus is that rather than shrink from society, we're to invade it and we're to impact it because society is full of people. And you know what? Even churches are full of people who just desperately need a friend. As an example of this principle, let me just read this portion by Joseph Aldrich from a message he once gave, and it's entitled, Education in the Red Light District, How to Be a Redemptive Person. It goes this way. When my wife and I went to Dallas Seminary, we decided we wouldn't live in cemetery housing. Instead, we lived in the high-class red light district. If you want to get an introduction to life itself, that's the place to be. We made a commitment to take one non-Christian person, couple, or individual out to dinner once a week. And did we ever get a liberal education? But what fun. We had people coming to know the Lord right and left in that place because we simply loved them. We opened our home to them. By and large, these types of people won't be coming to our church because they see the church as out of date, irrelevant, and uncaring. So we have to be the church to them. In other words, we need to display the love of Christ to them. So the question is, where do we do this? And the question is obvious. Everywhere we go, in our workplace, in our natural relationships, in our kids' sports teams, in the relationship we have with the parents that we meet in our kids' sports teams, at the end of the grocery checkout where the attendant is, or the gas station attendant. You know, everybody needs Jesus, and everybody needs a church home. And that's why we're trying to build a church, not just for the church, but for the unchurched. The unchurched may be anyone. It could be the derelict, the drug addict, the alcoholic, the guy living next door in a 2-story house, or the guy with a high-paying job. Everybody needs Jesus. Everybody needs a home. See, Jesus understands, and he was driven with compassion. And in this world, we are to be like him. Thanks for joining us today on Devoted.